First, thank you all for accepting our invitation to join this panel. And I particularly thank Luci for being a war partner here, so to speak. When I shared the idea with her, she immediately responded and we started. And thank you all for joining. Let me start by saying how this whole thing came about. The world has changed, and it looks like many people are not acknowledging that or responding to it or seeing it. We have sanitized slogans being peddled around that don't really align with the changes that took place in the world today. The alignments have changed, the powers have changed. The West is no more alone in the game. We have China, Russia, North Korea forming with other nations from Latin America and the Middle East and so on, BRICS. And that's a big change that we have to acknowledge. But even we thinkers, we experts, don't even bring this up as much. It looks like change took us by surprise, and we're sitting here talking about obsolete words, obsolete slogans and notions. War is a notion that has to be re-examined. We don't know what war is. Peace. Democracy is something that has to be challenged, because people talk about democracy as if we all know what democracy is. And as we see from what's happening in the United States and elsewhere, the people democratically voted for Trump, whether we like it or not. People democratically also voted for Hitler. So we really want to know what democracy is. Is it about the freedom to vote or by representation? Or is there something else to democracy? I think America has its own notion of what democracy is from Europe, different from Europe and the rest of the world. And we have to really reconsider this. Diplomacy, there's a term that is repeated all the time. Diplomacy failed. Well, there is diplomacy going on in Qatar, and there is diplomacy going on in Turkey. So it hasn't failed. It's changed its form. And we want to know about that. Colonialism, we talk about it as if it's in the past. We are living colonialism. Africa's trying to liberate itself from the Western hold and plunder of its resources. And we have all this pacification means. We are still trying to pacify people. Look at the Palestinians. How can we talk about sustainability, education, food security? What is it to the Palestinians who are under occupation and being bombarded, starved, incinerated? Their hospitals are being attacked, killing the patients, and we are assassinating their doctors and assassinating the journalists who will tell us about it. All of these are violations of what is called the universal human values established by the United Nations. But what is happening? So essentially, I thought that WAAS already has many minds and people empirically conducting research in their own areas of focus. And if we get together and talk about all these things, how can we align these obsolete slogans with what is really happening in the world? And when we talk about security, education, and so on, how can we relate a situation like the Palestinians to all these things? So to put together such minds of people who are all experts in their fields, that's you, the panelists, and who are conducting empirical research, they are not just talking off the top of their head, but relating what they are doing to better reflect what's happening in the world today. And that's how this came about. So I will stop here and will start by introducing Dr. Professor Jelel EZZINE from Tunis. He's professor at the University of Tunis, who took us back to the 14th century Arab world, where Ibn Khaldun gave us a scientific theory about development and society. I was always interested in Ibn Khaldun, as Jelal knows, but Dr. Jelal is reviving this, and we want to hear how his view of the neo-Khaldunism, as he calls it, relates to the changes in the world. So I leave you, Jelal.
Thank you very much, Fadwa, for this excellent framing of this panel. I also would like to congratulate WAAS for this excellent and highly timely conference. So I will start my intervention. And so, friends and colleagues, let me start or begin with a paradox. We gather, in the name of peace today, yet the language we use is peace offensive. Is itself, I find, a contradiction. An offensive is an act of war. To make peace a campaign, a maneuver, a tactical move, is to remain trapped in the very logic that sustains violence. Okay? And yet, I recognize the value of what has been initiated. The so-called global peace offensive, championed by institutions like the World Academy of Art and Science and the Club of Rome, is a welcome mobilization. But let us be honest. Mobilization is not metamorphosis. Okay? A peace offensive, however well-meaning, still imagines peace through power, deterrence, and control. So let us be bolder. So I invite you to be bolder and say that peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the presence of meaning, justice, and life in balance. In the wake of Operation Rising Lion, where missiles scream louder than diplomacy, we must confront the uncomfortable truth. War today is not a breakdown. It is a system function. So, and I believe this is how our collapsing world order is reproducing itself. It is fossil-fueled, algorithmically targeted, hyper-nationalized, and spiritually bankrupt. From Gaza to Sudan, from Ukraine to Iran, war is not an exception. It is the shadow of a civilization that has lost its compass. Consider, for instance, the recent report by the UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese. In this report, or this document, it documents how an entire corporate ecosystem, arms, tech, energy, agribusiness, finance, is profiting, from and enabling the destruction of Gaza. Over 60 companies, including Lockheed Martin, Caterpillar, Palantir, Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, BNP Paribas, are named in what she calls an economy of genocide. And this is precisely why neo-Khaldunism is not just timely, it is even necessary. Rooted in the brilliance of Ibn Khaldun, Neo-Khaldunism is not a political theory. It is a civilizational science, a transcendental compass to navigate collapse and move beyond it. Civilizations do not fall only by external attack. They collapse when moral economies rot from within, when asabiya, which is the collective spirit, fades, when decadence replaces cohesion, when simulation replaces meaning. Then war becomes not just possible, but inevitable. So, what does peace require? Peace is not more dialogue between the same tired actors, not ceasefires that freeze injustice, not transition that change the fuel but preserves the machine. Peace requires metamorphosis. It requires a just fossil fuel phase out, a moral economy of sufficiency, power rooted in dignity, be it local, indigenous, or spiritual, a civilization that remembers its ecological limits. And yes, it requires initiatives like the Global Peace Offensive to move further, to abandon euphemism and embrace a radical transition. Let me offer one final nudge. The age of peace talks is over. The age of peace design must begin. The Global South is no longer a receiver of lectures. It holds the materials, the lens, the wisdom, and now perhaps the worldview to lead a rebirth. Neo-Khaldunism is not utopia. It is not ideology. It is a prelude to the possible. It is the unveiling of a post-collapse humanism grounded in ethics, rhythm, and regeneration. We do not need a peace offensive. We need a peace renaissance.
Thank you, Jelel. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'll finish by saying, let this be the moment we stop managing decline and start navigating metamorphosis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm interested in your civilizational science. I'd like to talk to you about that more later. I'm going to now speak briefly. I do want to remind the rest of the panelists to stick within time so that we can have some questions at the end, please, if possible. I'm going to speak briefly about the environmental costs of war. So I'm changing focus to something that is more practical, if you like. So today, the International Court of Justice issued its first ever advisory opinion on climate change. It agreed that a clean, healthy, and a sustainable environment is a human right. They addressed states' obligations and the consequences for those people who are causing, or most states who are causing most harm. This was requested by the United Nations General Assembly, and this moment could redefine global responsibility for the climate and open the door to lawsuits against major polluters. Now, importantly, the court was expected to consider military and conflict-related emissions. Countries like Palestine and Mexico called for these to be included in national climate obligations, and legal records show that the court is addressing them under principles of state responsibility and due diligence. Now, although this is just advisory, the ruling could be a really powerful tool for future climate litigation and policy influencing both courts and governments. And in this context, we must confront the hard truth. Modern militias are not a public good. They are a moral catastrophe. As highlighted by Andrew Feinstein's work, they are sickening, profit-driven machines propped up by lobbying, secrecy, and war economies. Just 4 arms companies earn hundreds of billions annually, ensuring war and its fallout never ends. Feinstein warns us that the arms trade doesn't just fuel violence, it commodifies it, profiting from destruction and using messages of insecurity to avoid accountability. The environmental cost of war is immense and overlooked in favor of narratives of necessary securities, from manufacturing to bombing. Every phase of the military machine damages ecosystems, destroys forests, poisons farmland and the water. NATO rearmament alone is set to add 200 million tons of CO2 annually. The US military emits more than most countries, projected as 178 million tons by 2026. Militaries contribute more than 5.5% of global emissions, as much as the world's 4th largest polluter. Humanity is being forced to destroy itself and our home in the name of protection. It's a horror show. If we are serious about justice, we must recognize war is significantly contributing to the ecological crisis. Regardless of politics or borders, it is destroying our shared planet and forcing ordinary people to be murderers. As the Archbishop of Canterbury recently said at a climate change conference, we are all now called to interfere in what is destroying the world around us. The climate cannot afford our silence. We are all called to interfere. We are obliged to speak out and actively interfere. Thank you for listening to me. Now I'd like to hand over to Vesna. I have the great pleasure of handing over to Vesna, who is going to explore the challenges and the resilience of education during times of war and peace, and highlighting its role perhaps in healing and rebuilding. Over to you, Vesna. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Fadwa and Luci, for organizing this panel and for giving me a chance to speak a little bit and contribute to this conversation. Basically, I was asked, and I think it's a good idea, to talk about my country's and my own family's experience in being bombed, in living under bombardment. So the case is of the NATO aggression on, at that time, Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which consisted of only 2 remaining republics from the former socialist Yugoslavia, which were Serbia and Montenegro. The bombing took place in the spring of 1999, from March to June, so almost 3 months. 19 NATO countries participated in this aggression, and the whole thing started without the approval of the UN in any manner, General Assembly, or any other sub institution. So the bombing of Yugoslavia was also known as the last war, or let's say use of arms and bombing in Europe in the 20th century. Anyway, yes, the overall cost of the damage, in the material sense, in very direct costs, and the ones around it, was about 100 billion euros. Now, to go to education. In this time of 3 months, everything stopped. So there was no schooling on elementary, intermediate, or high level. So I, as a professor of university, did not go to hold classes, but I went to communicate with my colleagues, because at that time, the internet was actually almost only working well at the university at the university, and not as well from home. Of course, it was also interrupted because of the whole situation. And I was trying to explain to my colleagues what was going on from the ground. And I was also writing a diary, which actually proved what is an interesting thing here also to mention regarding schools and schooling and bombing of schools, that the targets in this war or aggression were not only the military and police infrastructures, but they were also they were also symbolic in a sense. It was called, in official terms by the NATO, it was called collateral damage, but it included hospitals, schools, vehicles in motion, like cars, buses, and trains. Also crucial infrastructure, like major bridges, major roads, to disconnect certain cities and so on. Okay, to go to the family aspect, we had 2 small children at that time, just starting elementary school. So our strategy is in dealing with a wartime and war situation was to pretend it wasn't going on. It wasn't happening. So we continued with schooling our children at home. My husband did the natural sciences, I did the social and humanities. We also took them regularly under the sirens to their tennis classes, and we didn't go to shelters. This I think proved well, but of course it wasn't such a destructive war as it is going on now, for example, in Gaza, where everything is destroyed, and you couldn't manage such things. So basically, the situation for actually the education for 12 generations of youth in these 3 months stopped. Most of the people did not do home schooling. We were probably exceptions. Okay. So you can imagine from this just small experience that I'm telling you about, and just let's say the imagined results of children and youth missing things that they would learn, we can imagine what's going on and how much children are missing and youth is missing in education in wars like in Ukraine, which is already for going on for 3 years and more, and in Gaza for almost 2 years. So this is a short story about, which we could think about and also see the implications in much more serious situations. Not saying that this wasn't serious, but yeah, this is for now.
Vesna, thank you so much for that ethnographic account. That brings, I mean, the phrase is perhaps wrong, but brings to life something of the lived experience that people are suffering and going through. And thank you for sharing that very personal account. I appreciate it. And I'm sure everyone does. I'm going to hand over to Louise now. Louise is going to present her work on the archaeology of Gaza, offering a powerful memory of a place now fighting for survival and cultural preservation amid extraordinary destruction.
I'm trying to cut it out as much as I can. So thank you, Lucy, for inviting me to be part of this wonderful event. And I had the privilege of working in Gaza as an archaeologist in the late 1990s. I stayed, first of all, in the Catholic Church in Gaza City. And later on, our work was facilitated by the British Council and by UNRWA. So I'm very grateful for all those organisations for facilitating what we did there. And I want to concentrate on, there's been a lot of work done, some really, really good work on the destruction of the cultural heritage of Gaza. And I don't want to talk about that. What I want to do is bring to life the vibrancy of this wonderful ancient culture that's flourished around the area of the Wadi Gaza, from Gaza City up in the north down as far as Dar el-Balah in the south of Gaza. And this is very, just before I get onto that, I think it's also worth highlighting that the Wadi Gaza itself has been recognised as a place of international importance. It is on the tentative World Heritage site list as a natural resort, natural heritage, because of its unique biosystem and its importance for migratory birds. So there's this whole landscape that developed around the Wadi Gaza from the 4th millennium BC, and it's a really vibrant, rich culture. The most famous of the sites is the site of Tel el-Ajul, which was excavated in the 1930s by Flinders Petrie. He actually did a pretty bad job. It's not like Petrie done that. He did a pretty bad job, and it's very hard to make sense of what he did there. But he uncovered a really vibrant Canaanite community, evidence for occupation in the first half of the 2nd millennium BC down to about 1400 BC. And Tel el-Ajul was really important archaeologically for the immense wealth that was found there. It was a vibrant, prosperous community. It was trading extensively with places like Cyprus in particular. There's a strong Egyptian influence, but it was particularly well known for its gold work, and it's one of the wealthiest sites to have been excavated throughout the Levant, from Ugarit up in the north right the way down to Tel el-Ajul in the south. Really, really rich. And one of the reasons is Flinders Petrie used to pay his workmen, he'd check the times every day for the value of gold, and he'd pay his workmen the value of gold that they found. So it made its way into the archaeological record, but incredibly rich. And that is the best known site from Gaza. The other sites have either been tentatively excavated in the late 1990s or have been excavated or haven't been excavated at all. And I think this is very sad, because this wonderful landscape is disappearing. But what we see in Gaza is, in the area around the Wadi Gaza, is a place where armies have tramped over this land since the Egyptians first arrived there in the late 4th millennium BC, around about the time of King Narmer, the legendary unifier of ancient Egypt. And a site was excavated, Tel Sakan, there. And there's just a litany of people marching over this landscape, but these really densely occupied region there. There's this old site of Gaza up in the north, under the old city of Gaza, and just to the east of that was another very important 2nd millennium Tel site, Tel Muntar. I worked at the site El-Manar, and we excavated evidence of activity by Thutmose III and Hatshepsut, which is very interesting. Very well published as well, so little plug for the publication, but very interesting, again showing this document, this litany of rulers. And down in Dar el-Balah, an Egyptian settlement was established there. And the last site I want to mention is the site of Antidon, which has been excavated by French archaeologists in the 1990s. It's the port site of ancient Gaza. It's again on the tentative list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And by all reports that I've been able to establish, that site has been bombed and it has been bulldozed in the last 2 years. So that site has disappeared. The other sites I've mentioned have been damaged. I don't know if they've been destroyed. There's a lot of work going on to establish the state of preservation of these sites. But what is being lost is a knowledge of a very rich, important cosmopolitan area, trading and military area. So, and I think I want to leave it there.
Thank you so much, Louise. That's such interesting information, and really highlights some of the other problems associated with war and trying to find peace. And now I'm going to turn towards Thomas, who I'm hoping is going to examine the critical links between food security and global governance. Maybe?
Yes, yes. Well, the title of my paper, you could say the war on food, or the war with food. For example, the war on using food deprivation in Gaza at the moment is a good example. The fact that throughout Africa, it's the conflict zones, the war zones, where you have the highest level of starvation. But that's quite obvious, but I'm going to talk about less obvious forms of war with food or through food. That is based on basically a corruption of moral economy. Something Scott and Thompson coined that term. I've modified it into moral ecology because it's also a war on nature. Okay, so food sovereignty is the ability to feed yourself as a community, a household, a nation, and it's a systems feature. And these systems are diverse because local ecosystems differ, local societies differ. Everyone has a different way of being food sovereign. So there's not a single threat to the system or a single solution. There's a lot of diversity. But there's also a worldwide war going on, which is silent, but is actually killing many millions of people. So the threat to food security at the global level is to do with demand, supply, and distribution, basically. But there's a common, in all of these areas, there's a common problem because there's a massive moral economy deficit. In other words, the way the system operates is immoral. Well, there's world population growth is one of the risks on the demand side. We're expecting 50% increase of the population by 2050. It may not actually happen. The latest data show a fairly steep decline in the growth rate, and it may soon become negative. But still, there's a lag, and so we're going to have a lot more human beings around. More importantly, though, is per capita consumption. It's growing. And if you look there at India, you're going to have more than doubling, also in China, of the consumption of meat, which has a much bigger impact than plant-based diets. We got to remember that agriculture causes about a quarter, by some measures a third of all greenhouse gas emissions, and a large part of that is from livestock. The war on nature that is modern agriculture is amazing. If you look at this, the four little squares at the top left are wild mammals. The rest is humans and our edible pets. So you can see that we've pushed nature into a tiny corner, and so there's 3 times more domestic pigs than there is mammals on land and sea in the world.
Tom, if you have 2 more minutes.
So the other supply risk is to do with water and soil loss because of overexploitation and modern techniques of chemical inputs use on soil, which is really destroying it. The other thing is climate change is going to affect yields, especially in those countries that are already in trouble, in Africa, India, Southeast Asia, China. And we've been relying on agricultural technology to try and increase yields, but that is not going to continue. And we have a widening gap between demand and supply. But the other problem is that we have huge problems in food distribution. The poorest countries are always the first victims, but also the working and downwardly mobile middle classes in rich countries. And there is a high market dependence, and everywhere food affordability is decreasing. Now, I remind you of Kissinger's old idea that if you control oil, you control nations, but if you control food, you control the people. So this is the control mechanism. These 9 big retail cartels have basically captured most of the food market. And also at the wholesale level, 2 companies, for example, Cargill and Continental, control half of the wheat in the world. Then there's financial manipulation and profiting from hunger by speculation with food.
Thomas,
So
I
there's really a
apologize,
war
but
on
can
the
you
poor.
round up?
I will.
Thank you.
There's 2 approaches to this. Some people still, despite all the evidence, put their trust into big agriculture and more technology, more consolidation. But others, including myself, believe that I put my trust in the moral economy that you find at the community level still, where small farmers operate. I've recently published a book on that. And here's why I subscribe to that view. And it is because small farmers feed 2/3 of the world with healthy food on less than a quarter of the arable land, whereas corporate farming largely produces sugar, carbohydrates, and oil, and some ethanol for biofuels, and that with massive subsidies from the state, while small farmers are largely ignored, people like this. And I've worked in Indonesia for 30 years. I've seen in rapid motion how ecosystems were destroyed there. This is in the highlands of Bali, where I did my PhD research. And you can see how the landscape has changed from a farm on the left. You wouldn't even recognize it as a farm. It's so biodiverse, it looks like a forest. And on the right, you have this monoculture, not even a blade of grass, because of the use of glyphosate. This is my final slide. And so really the modern agriculture system and its corporate structure is really a war on healthy food. We got millions of people dying from the consequences of an unhealthy diet. And and it's also a total war on ecosystems. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And so as we have pushed into the time, let me just very quickly introduce Phoebe, who is going to be discussing sustainable development in the context of war. Please tell me if that's true. Yes, good.
That's
Good. Okay.
That's true. Well,
Thanks, Phoebe. Over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Fadwa, for having me here. It's a big honor and a pleasure, and I learned a lot. It was such a beautiful session with many different aspects that were hugely interesting, at least for me. So I work on innovative systems transformation, and the aim is the sustainable interaction between nature and society. And of course, we all recognize that we are living in this geopolitical crisis era with many wars, prolonged wars taking place, different versions of wars in different spaces across the globe. And all this is caused not only because of difficulties with economic growth, slow economic growth, difficulties with population, increasing population in some areas of the world, decreasing populations in other, not having enough labor force in the developed world, for example, in Europe, increasing inequalities, income inequalities, and other inequalities with regards to accessing vital resources. And of course, we are also facing climate crisis, biodiversity collapse, all these multi-crises. We agreed in 2015 that we want to escape through the implementation of the UN Agenda 2030, the 17 goals, the 169 targets within them, a very holistic framework that can support human welfare away from all these crises, including war. And this is what my team, the Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation, is working on the last almost 30 years, identifying the optimal mixture of dynamic and spatial solutions for implementing a holistic and integrated framework that will support the ecosystems, the natural ecosystems we live in, the socioeconomic systems, in a way that can really flourish, that can really allow human welfare to flourish. Let's see how we are doing, at least with the latest structure of UN agreement of goals. This is the 2050 Sustainable Development goals of UN 2030 agenda. And this is the latest report measuring the performance of all countries in the world against the implementation of these goals. And you can see that we are lagging behind. Only 17% are on track. Now let's see how we are doing specifically with regards to goal 16, which is about peace, justice, and strong institution, and goal 17, which is about collaboration. Obviously, all the goals are massively influenced by war, but these are the goals that are measuring our performance with regards to avoiding war, to building on collaboration. And I should say here that the red means major challenges into achieving the goals, and orange means significant challenges for achieving the goal. So red is below 50% achievement, and orange is between 50 to 70%. And this is the goal on peace, justice, and strong institutions. And basically, it's red all around. This is the
Phoebe,
goal that
forgive me, you have 1 minute left.
Okay, that's fine. This is the goal that shows how we promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development. Look at this map now. This is the indicator within goal 16, which focuses on exporting of major conventional weapons. See who is exporting. It's the US and some countries in Europe. And then this is the goal for the partnerships. And again, we are seriously underperforming here, with the whole of the world map being colored into red and orange. And all aspects of human security, political freedom, access to healthcare, economic security, community security, personal safety, access to technology, environmental, food security, are all jeopardized in this structure of war. There is no sustainable development with war. There is nothing to be supported if you have war. It's not just the environment, natural resources that are distracted, it's the whole cohesion of the socioeconomic system. So Let me just say that amid rising geopolitical tensions and widening global inequalities and the escalating climate crisis, this year's Sustainable Development Report of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, I lead the European quarters of this network and I work on this report, shows that the world overwhelmingly recognizes that the Sustainable Development Goals are our vital pathway to peace, equity, and well-being. And to date, 190 countries out of 193 UN member states have participated in producing voluntary national reviews with regards to the SDGs. So there is support for these SDGs, and they can be very helpful in building explicit recommendations on the optimal mixture of dynamic and spatial changes in the socioeconomic and political system that can allow us to become sustainable. Let me say that only 3 countries that have not participated with voluntary contributions are Haiti, Myanmar, and the United States. So I want to close on a positive note, saying that the UN-based multilateralism should be given more power and attention. And we have also measured the UN multilateralist focus of different states around the world, and it shows that people want to use this instrument, want to make it more effective.
Thank you. We've run out of time. Okay, well, are there any questions? Fadwa, do you have a question?
It's not a question as much as a comment from... We also lose knowledge, and as academics and researchers, this is not brought up. It's not one of the practical things. We lose knowledge. I remember when Iraq was invaded, I was terrified because I knew prominent archaeologists from Chicago who were then digging in Iraq for very important information, and I was terrified. I mean, of course, the whole thing was terrible, but I called the director of the Smithsonian Institution. I said, what's going on? Iraq is being bombarded indiscriminately. There is archaeology going on. And he said, well, my hands are tied, he said. And he said he was told by the State Department and the Pentagon and so on that the army was told Iraq has no pyramids, so bomb. I was flabbergasted at the ignorance by which these dominant powers who are going around ruling the world and directing bombs at innocent children and women like in Palestinians have no clue what knowledge is and where we get it.
Go ahead, Fadwa, go ahead. Oh, Vesna,
Okay,
sorry.
I see there is nobody else right now asking or commenting. So I wanted to just say something I wanted to say in preparation for this panel, because you asked us, you know, to prepare 1 sentence or 2 sentences about how we see from our own research and life experience what can be built into, let's say, peacemaking. So my suggestion, and this very much goes in line with what Phoebe was talking about, although, I mean, all the presentations were really so wonderful, but what Phoebe mentioned about the human security dimensions and SDGs. Basically, in human security dimensions, the political one, the political security was mentioned in the 7th place, so among the last ones. She, interestingly enough, put it in the 1st place. This is what I wanted to say. Also, in the SDGs, the peace, the one dealing with peace, is also the 16th, so it's one before the last. my suggestion is that we should try to reverse the order of these, let's say, strong messages, words that are actually dealing with all the most important things that we are here talking about, and also that are happening in the world and that are needed. And this is because we usually talk about sustainability in the first place, then human security in the second, and peace in the last place as the third. I think we should promote the idea of thinking in reverse, peace in first place, and then these other two, because nothing can happen without peace. Nothing can happen in war. So this is the crucial thing. And going back to education, which I talked about, and which is, of course, one of the major avenues of spreading ideas, major ideas, is that educational institutions should worry about that and forcefully, I'm sorry, I shouldn't use the word forcefully. It sounds like too forceful. The institutions should actually promote this kind of idea and educate our youth all around the world about what peace means, and that should be the first thing that we should worry about. And also anthropology comes in there as very important, because anthropology explains our commonalities and differences. And wars are not that they occur as much due to differences, but they're explained often. And the differences are misused, cultural differences, social differences, right? Ethnic, whatever, religious, as the reasons for war. So this is my message.
Thanks, Vesna. Thanks for doing that final little task as well. I mean, for my 1 penny's worth, I don't think any of us know what peace is. To say that peace is the absence of war is simplistic and empty. We know that. But we don't say what it is. To say it isn't something is simply not good enough. And actually, I don't think any of us know or have a conception of what a really peaceful world would look like. And that would be the thing that I think we would need to focus on, because right now, there's a litmus test for humanity in Gaza and the West Bank right now to see if we can uphold the principles of justice, of dignity, of rights. It seems we can't. So what is peace? What do we mean by peace? I've not heard anything yet, I'm not talking about just this panel, in my life that clearly says, this is what it looks like. This is how it feels. This is how it tastes. Yeah. So someone help me.
Can I add also one thing? To this connection. Also, we should look at how wars are being waged in peace, in what looks like peace. A lot of levels of warring is actually going on as a preparation to a real war, but also as an alternative to the arms war. Because many aims of different countries, especially the big ones, are actually attained, especially in the last few decades, not through armed war, but through peaceful war. This is another addition.
That's exactly what I was trying to say, Vesna, with food as
Financial
an example.
wars.
But it's really the real war is an economic war, and it's going on all the time. And that's why we've never experienced peace, like Luci says, because it's all about, and I love that cartoon in Phoebe's first page of the planet. Everyone crowded in the south half, in the north half, there's the 1%. And it says still not enough, and the war has to go on. We have to have more, and that's really the driving force behind every war. It's always conflicts between the 1%. Look at Trump's war now, what it's doing to developing countries. Those tariffs, they're devastating for developing. For many years, we've have allowed low tariffs for developing countries so they could build up. So they could develop economically, and now, no more. So it's, if anything, it's escalating, and we know where it comes from.
But we do need as scholars to re-examine, go back to the drawing table and re-examine all these things: peace, war, security. We have to redefine them. We are using obsolete meanings to these. Peace now is ceasefire. If you notice, the minute somebody gets attacked, all the nation says we have to go for a ceasefire, which is nothing. It's 3 days of unreported bombing, and they continue to bomb. So this is all obsolete. We do need an entire plenary to take each of these concepts and redefine them in the context of the reality of what's happening in the world today. It has changed.
Yeah. Let's give the final word to Jelel then, who's got his hand up. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, of course, I mean, definitions are very important. And for us academicians, we love to have, well stated and clean definitions. But I really would like to go even deeper before the definitions. The question is, why do we have war? Okay. And wars is not just, people having guns and killing each others. You see, that's really the pinnacle of brutality and conflicts between people. But hunger, poverty, injustice, all of these are, different forms of wars that the more powerful are trying to exercise their might to actually, through extractivism or colonialism or what have you, to keep their hedonistic way of living, to the expense of the majority, which is really living in very, very bad condition. So our system is broken, all right? And we cannot just try to really mend little problems here and there. I believe we really need to review our problem and go down to the basic, causes of this chaos humanity finds itself in. Today we have only like these 1% using dark money, to actually manipulate even knowledge, even produce knowledge that is false for their own interest. You see, these things we also need to worry about. These people use money to choose who will be running this country or the other country. So the problem is very deep. And if we don't really find a solution very soon, nature will do it for us. And you know how nature will take care of us very, very nicely. Thank you very much.
I think on that note, we really do have to admit we've finished and that the panel is over. It's past 6 o'clock. So thank you to everybody for listening to us ranting up here.